Alrighty. Hey gang. Welcome back, you guys. Another episode of Stove Chat, episode 22. And happy Wednesday, you guys. How are you? I hope you guys are doing great. Hope you guys are having a good day, good week, good couple weeks. Welcome back. Welcome to Stove Chat, you guys. So, yeah, I'm here. I'm a little scattered as usual. You guys are used to that. YouTube is once again messing up my the whole live streaming thing. They keep changing the dashboard, so I've been scrambling these last few minutes trying to get it updated here. So hopefully it works. I don't know if it's gonna work. They changed all my settings and wouldn't let me go back to the other page. So anyways, enough about that. Just please let me know if things are working, if you can hear me. I don't know. It just seems all screwed up. My analytics are different. I can't see anything. I'm frustrated with it. But anyways, how are you guys? I don't even know if I got the chat set up right. Dang, I don't see if anyone's... Oh, there's a chat. Hey, Robin. That helps. Thank you, Robin. I was wondering if I was even reaching anybody. YouTube has this little code that you have to put into your streaming stuff. And I've had the same code, and I've got my settings for my Stove Chat on that code. And then they forced me to go to this new page, and I have to use a new code, so I have to get a whole new streaming setup, and it messes up all my settings. And so I'm hoping it's working. So thank you, Robin. That helps loud and clear, she says. And Alicia, thank you. Glad you guys are here. Thanks for being here. Welcome. This is distracting. The new channel has me... I can't seem to not watch myself over there. I'm turning it off. Okay. Enough about that. Hi, you guys. Welcome back. Happy September. Hope you guys are all doing great. I had an awesome week last week. I spent a lot of time in the water surfing. I want to thank you guys for giving me a little break there. And I am revved up and, raring to go on stoves. I've had a great couple weeks. I have gotten a ton of emails from you guys. We got some great questions to go over. I want to thank you, as always, for all your support and for all those great questions and your input. And I've also got some great build photos from some folks that we can look at and talk about and all that sort of good stuff. So how about you guys? How is everyone out there doing? Does anyone have any questions to start the day? I've got a couple things we can start with that I can just dive right into. But if anyone is working on their project and would like to have some of my input, I'm here and available. So, and that's really the main goal of this, is to give you guys an opportunity for us to get together and chat about your ideas and your builds. So I'm not always going to have content or a show. I'm really just making myself available. So so there's that. So let's see. We're getting into September now. It's nice and warm here, but I've been getting cool mornings. I'm about ready to start lighting up in the mornings and taking the chill off. I wonder if anyone out there is burning yet. I'm thinking it's probably still pretty warm everywhere, so probably not quite yet. But we're getting close, gang. We're getting close. So my firewood is all put up, and I'm going to start here on my fall firewood gathering. I always try and do, about half of my chore firewood gathering in the fall, but that's not for this year. That'll be for next year. So the wood that I have in this woodshed this year, some of it's from last fall, some of it's from this spring. So ideally, I'd like to get 2 years ahead on that program, but I'm not quite there yet. Alicia says she's in Oklahoma and it's still hot and humid. Yeah, I figured, Alicia, in Oklahoma, it's not anywhere near wood stove season yet, but it's just around the corner. I know it comes fast, doesn't it? But yeah, I bet you guys are having some hot summer weather right now. So it's cool where I am. We're here. I'm up on the Canadian border, next to the ocean, so I'm below 50 at night. Even in the hottest times of August in the summer. There's a few rare exceptions, but for the most part, it's 50-ish and below. And so I still tend to have fires really all year long, in the evenings or mornings. So good place for a wood stove tester to live, I guess. Yeah, so there's that. So hey, I'll just dive right into a couple of the topics I wanted to talk about, and if you guys got questions, feel free to throw them at me, and we'll just pick it up and work on them. So the very first one, I got a really good a really good email from someone who was facing their first build. And this person's email was really long and really detailed, which I love. And I love, reading people's thoughts as they go into these builds. And I'm not going to even go into the details of what the questions were, but the overall theme, which isn't what they said, but I just read between the lines, and the overall theme was that I've never done any of this stuff before, and I have a lot of doubts. And that was kind of the overall theme of all of these questions from this customer. And not only did they have a lot of doubts, but they were just almost paralyzed, like analysis paralysis, right? Like really unsure about taking that first step, because they didn't know, because they had doubts at certain steps in the build, and some of those steps were a long ways away, but they still were, giving me really detailed questions about how exactly this was going to go together when they got to that step. And so it really inspired me to make this section, to address this here. So Alicia, yeah, and Robin, yeah, and you know what, you guys, so Robin and Alicia both just said me too, and I wanted to say that the reason that this topic is so dear to my heart is because me too. I mean, I remember vividly. I mean, it's actually one of the things that sticks in my head the most whenever I teach workshops, whenever I reach out to help anyone, whenever I'm consulting with people. One of the things that I remember about my journey the most is being at that stage and being like, well, will you just tell me how the cob is going to go over this part? Like, I've got this thing, it's going to be built like this, and there's this one section I just don't know how it's going to work. It's like the cob and the opening and the stuff, and I just don't know what's going to happen. What should I do? What is my method? What is my technique? What's my tactic? And so I remember feeling that way and wanting to know, have it all figured out and planned out and sorted out down to the final nut and bolt before I started. And feeling like I really couldn't start, or really wasn't, I just didn't have a solid plan until I really had sorted out all those details. And so this little, hey Pete, there you are, nice to see you. Yeah, I'm here. So this little section in the stove chat here is really one of encouragement. And that is just to simply say that those doubts are totally normal. Rocket Stove Course. Luke, how you doing, man? Nice to see you. Some of us are waiting on the other video. Yeah, I complained about it already. I apologize. I'm sorry for anyone who got mixed up. YouTube is I opened this segment with how frustrated I was with YouTube because they keep forcing me out of my old live stream presets. So I couldn't get back to that one. I don't know what they're doing, man, but I opened this thing up 15 minutes before it's go time, and all of a sudden I've got to totally reconfigure everything. So I apologize that you guys are waiting on the other stream. I don't know how to address it. YouTube doesn't give you any recourse. There's no where to click and no one to talk to. So thanks, Tall Shadow. They screwed me up too. I'm sitting here complaining about it. I'm trying not to, but it makes me so frustrated. I get here ready to go, and then I just panic because I've got to redo all my settings. It won't let me get back to that other stream. I know. I was there this morning. I clicked on it this morning. I said schedule next stream. Thought it was all good to go, and then I come back to try and get to it now, and YouTube says, use your new studio creator. You can't use your old one. So, I really apologize that it's frustrating you guys. It is absolutely driving me bonkers. Like, I almost want to, when I turn on the computer to come do this thing, and it shows me that, I almost just want to quit. I just get so frustrated. So yeah, I'm over here. I'm not on the other one. YouTube. Sorry. Like I said, I almost can't even talk now. I'm just so upset about it. I have a funny way of being upset. I just laugh, but really I just get so frustrated. So What was I talking about? How mad I am at YouTube. Okay, so I'm so frustrated. I'll just wait and let you guys roll in here. I won't quit, Mark. Obviously, I'm sticking it out. You have no idea how much it took for me to punch through to even get to this point. From when I click on it, and it says, "Welcome to new YouTube Creator Studio Live," and I'm like, the old one's ready to go. I was ready to go right now, and so then I get to set it all up. I mean, it just, oh. Okay, so the good news is that this morning they absolutely would not let me get back to the old one, so I did go through all the BS of setting up this new one. And so hopefully from here on out, now that I've moved off that old one, they'll stop bothering me with trying to make me use the new one, and we'll just be on this new one from now on. So I had to change my code. That's why you guys got a different stream from the other one. It streams to a totally different thing. Thanks, Tall Shadow. I need a hug right now. All right, shake it off. Woo! So, all good. I know that doesn't bother you guys. You guys are probably sick of hearing me complain. All right, so let's move on. Rocket stoves. So I was just talking about pre-build doubts, you guys. I was talking about that feeling you have when you're going through your build plan in your head and you haven't started and you've never built one. This is important. This is the important part. You've never built one. You've never played with the cob, and you're reading all this stuff. And this stemmed, I'll just recap what I already said. This stemmed from an email I got, and actually many, many emails. They happen all the time. But, emails I get where people are saying, I'm really uncertain about this stage of the build. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get to this point. I don't know how this goes together. Usually things that are far down the road in the build. And so, you're welcome, Mark. Thanks for appreciating it. It's funny. It shouldn't be so frustrating, but it just absolutely throws me. I'm kind of nervous when I do these things. I get a little nervous pre-show, and there's all kinds of stuff to do, and then they throw that at me, and I just I panic. So, appreciate you guys' support. So, at any rate, the pre-build doubts are a very real thing, and I want to talk about it because I want everyone to know that it happens to all of us. I remember it vividly in my first build. Belgian Gulch says it's overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming, and that's why we're here. That's why I'm here now. That's why Belgian Gulch and Tall Shadow are there on Permies helping all you folks out, and so many of us are here to help share this information, to encourage people to just dive in and start, because the pre-build doubts are crippling. And so I really want to bring up a few things about those pre-build doubts for the people who are in that mode, and just give you some confidence and help you move forward. First and foremost, there's no way for you to grasp how it's all going to go together from the start to the end with a clear vision of every detail. I don't think that's realistic, and I actually don't think that it's valuable to try and do that, because you will need to react to changing situations, material changes, size changes, shape changes. Things are going to change as you go through your build, despite your plans. You may be really close, but there's going to be some things that throw you for a loop, and so it's best to understand that as you approach certain details that were problematic for you in the thinking and the planning process, as you approach them, you will have a lot of time moving forward as you're building for them to sort of spend some time getting sorted out in your brain as you start to work through the build. So my feeling is that while you want to have most of your details fairly well nailed down and you have a pretty good idea of how it's all going to go together, do not agonize over the last little details, the nth degree. Get yourself a pretty good plan. I think I'm going to use cob and burlap over this section. I think I'm going to put screws to hold these hinges in. Just kind of get your general plan and then just start moving forward. And as you go, you will gain experience. You might not have attacked that part of the project yet, but you'll have far more experience with the brick and the cob and all that stuff. So let's just get started, move forward. And that's going to do a lot to your confidence and help you start to see those pieces of the puzzle that you can't see because they're around the corner and you just can't see that far ahead. Now, second, and part and parcel of that same thing, but almost more importantly, is that if you've never worked with the materials, you will have questions in your mind that really can't be answered by someone else. We can tell you how it's going to work, but really you're just unsure. And so really what I really encourage everyone to do is to just get outside before you even start your build, before you start your real detailed planning. If you've never played with cob or mortar, mud in that sense, mix it up. Get outside, make some, stack some bricks, start playing with it. Start making shapes, trying to patch holes. The reality is that the stuff is really forgiving. And once you get your hands dirty, you're going to be, so many of your questions are going to just leave. You will not be wondering how it's going to go together anymore. And so it's a funny thing to just say, well, don't worry, just move forward. But with these rocket stove builds, we are all, usually engaging in stuff that we have no prior experience with. I came to it with no experience with cob when I first started, and I was really concerned about how it was going to go together. As soon as I started working with it, it was like, oh, I get it. So it's just really an encouragement to say this is new territory for you, but don't be scared. They're all very simple techniques and processes. Dive in, get your hands wet, get your hands dirty. Start building your stove. Don't be afraid. It's going to be a process of trial and error. So, that's really the main point. I'm going to go back up and catch up with your chat, but I get those comments so often, and I really just want to say that totally normal, absolutely understandable, but don't let it paralyze you. Just move forward. So let me catch up here with you guys. Alicia says, when I build my house, I'm wanting small wood burners in every bedroom, but I don't want to experiment. I want to set it up and forget about it. Is that possible? So, yeah, Alicia, it is possible. And that big, long rant I just gave you was really for the people who are building and tweaking and tinkering. But that is why, why I have complete plans. It's entirely possible to just build a stove that others have built before that you just goes in once and is one and done. And you can build them yourself, or my plans are really easy brick structures. So I've had a lot of customers hire a local mason, and with usually just a few email consults with me, where they're able to get a professionally built, beautiful stove that's a lifetime piece and doesn't need to be revisited. So it's absolutely possible. Keep in mind that a lot of my customers are DIY folks. And so a lot of what I'm targeting is going to be for those people who love to experiment, love to tweak, love to build things themselves, love to customize for their space, all those things. But it certainly doesn't mean that there aren't solid, tried and true, performance proven, tested designs that you can just install and leave and never go back to. And again, that goes back to some of our core materials and stuff too. Sometimes I talk about different core materials, but if you're building one for other people to use that you want to never maintenance again, we'd make some choices to build it that way. So there you go. Just hope that answers your question. So going down through the chat, can't stop. Hello, nice to see you, my friend. Glad you're here. Thanks for being here. Tall Shadow says, having pre-build doubts here too. Just discovered that you have to be 6 feet away from electrical box. We'll have to move where I wanted it to be, but glad I only did a dry mock-up before mortaring. Yeah, Tall Shadow, that's a great input there in terms of things you might not have anticipated can crop up and completely change your plan, right? Like you're working away, no thoughts for the electrical box, and then whoa, someone comes in and says, hey man, code, you can't be that close to that thing. And yeah, so Tall Shadow says, I'm from Canada, but think it's kind of a general rule all around. And yeah, you're going to run into things that you weren't prepared for. And so, like I said, I think it's important to just sort of get in there and get in the space, look it around, start dry stack and say, okay, how does this fit? What are my issues right here? And you might have to make some changes. But that's an important piece of the puzzle is to evaluate all of those things, and a lot of times you can't do it until you're actually stacking stuff. So Augustus Smoothie asks, is that a state code? And Tall Shadow says he thinks it's kind of a general rule all around, although he's in Canada. And I do, Augustus, I can answer some of that. I think that for the most part, what you're going to find is that, the state building codes are going to vary somewhat, but with regards to things like, I think in this case, probably the wording of the code is probably solid fuel burning device and electrical box. So there, it's going to be more coded for like a wood stove, but you just can't have a wood stove that close to an electrical box. And there'll be those kind of codes for everywhere, and that one's probably fairly universal. I don't know that there's going to be any states that don't have some kind of call out for clearances between solid fuel and electrical. That's a pretty standard thing. Pete says, "Get your hands dirty" is a very wise lesson. Pete, you're a great spokesman for that, because I know, watching you go through your process this year of perfecting that pizza oven, you just don't know until you start to put those pieces together. And on another note, Pete, I went to Donkey's Board, and I saw that you're going to be building a vortex stove, and so that's another great example of getting your hands dirty. Here's Pete, he's built my core for a cook stove, and now he's going to go build a vortex stove, which is an awesome core, because he's going to get his hands dirty. He's going to get experience how they work, for himself. And I think that's part and parcel of this conversation. Is it goes with building techniques, like how do you use cob? Well, you just got to get your hands dirty and find out. But it also goes with your decisions that you make with regards to materials, the choice you make of J or batch, bell or bench, all those things are choices that you make. And while we're here to help people who don't have experience pick one and move forward, if you are a tinkerer, I strongly encourage you to experience as many of these as many as you can, just as many experiences in the rocket stove world as you can. People say bricks are good for a firebox or bad for a firebox, or insulation is good or bad. Dive in, get your hands dirty, experiment and experience it for yourself, and then you can form your own opinions, usually sort of building off of the platform of other people's opinions, whether it's approving or just sort of taking a little piece of it and go off to the side. But I think it's just super important to put those doubts aside and just say, I can do this. This is a hobby I'm into. I'm going to start building with this stuff and playing with this stuff. And you will end up with 80% of your questions just leave in your head, and you'll have a much clearer idea of what it is you're asking when you have questions. So let me get back to the chat here. Finbear, welcome. Nice to see you here. He's got a great question. Is stone as core material right out? Can it be coated to last? It's a really good question, Finbear. My opinion is that stone is right out as a core material for a couple of reasons. One is that it's just going to be high mass. So, unless, you could maybe use some volcanic stone or something like that, and that might be acceptable. I think you'd have such a hard time shaping it, but I don't know. Maybe it's usable. But in general, let's just say your average stone, high mass, so pretty unfavorable to your firebox in terms of efficiency, cleanliness. But more important than that is that stone, depending on which stone, but most stone is not going to be able to handle the really high and broad thermal, more the broad range of temperatures that happen over a short time period. It's not that the stone is bothered by the high temps, but the stone will be bothered by the swings from 70 degrees to 1500 degrees and back to 70 degrees over the course of, half an hour or an hour or whatever. And so it's very difficult for stone to hold up to that. It also is going to hurt your performance by being high mass. So I think there's much better materials. Now, all that said, if you were just out playing in the woods and all you got is stone, man, build it, try it, see what happens. I don't think it's going to hurt you, but it just wouldn't be. It would be sort of a last choice. It's not an impossible choice, but it's kind of the last choice. To be honest with you, I'd probably start with like a cob perlite if I could, just as a starting point for a free core, as it were. So there's that. Hope that answers your question, Finbear. And coatings, I don't think, are a real good solution. You'll reflect some of the heat back, but eventually that mass is going to just gather that heat, and it'll have the same issues. So Alicia says she loves the look of my oven and cooktop. Thank you, Alicia. I really appreciate that. It's one of my things I'm really proud of was being able to take this technology and wrap it into something that really, appealed to me aesthetically and functionally. Big departure from the barrel J-tubes. And that was really somewhere I was really eager to get to when I first started this. So I appreciate it. I'm really happy to hear that other people appreciate it too. So Augustus asks, welcome back, first of all, he says. So thank you, Augustus. It's nice to be back with you guys. And Augustus asks, will all insulation in the core eventually get up to the same temp? Would it work to surround half-inch high-temp CFB with a cheaper, lower-temp material? Yes and no, Augustus. So the thickness of the material is going to be the time. It's going to regulate the time that it takes for it all to reach that maximum temp. So, in other words, at that one, my cores are built with 2-inch thickness for the most part, mostly throughout. Up at the firebox, you have the 1-inch brick and the 1-inch core, so a little bit different. But if you make that insulative layer too thin, what's going to happen is you're going to go max temp on the inside, and then max temp on the outside of that insulation layer in a short amount of time. In other words, half-inch layer difference between a half-inch layer of insulation and a 1-inch layer of insulation is going to be twice as much time to hit max temperatures to the outside of the insulation. So how that manifests in the stove is it does manifest as being less insulated, so it does rob a little bit of heat from combustion. But more importantly is the question of what you put on the outside, right? Because if you only got half-inch ceramic fiberboard, whatever's outside there needs to be able to handle that heat as well. So you can certainly just use half-inch ceramic fiberboard, and then you could use like perlite and cob, or an insulated thing out there. But to be honest with you, the half-inch ceramic fiberboard is so fragile that it's almost worthless. It's just at 1 inch that stuff has some structure. You get down to half-inch and it's a lot like the ceramic wool. It starts to become more like a blanket than a board. So I hope that answers your question and makes some sense. But yes, the insulation will eventually, even 2 inches or 4 inches. You might not burn long enough if you have 4 inches to get the outside all the way that hot. It might take days, but eventually insulation doesn't change the temperature, it just slows the rate, right? So if the inside is 1500 degrees, the outside will eventually be 1500 degrees, maybe. I mean, it depends on conditions, if there's cold wind blowing by it or, whatever, probably not, but close to it anyways. But you just build that thickness up to, as a measurement of the time you need. So in my stoves, they're burning for a few hours. A couple inches is usually plenty. So I hope that answers your question, Augustus, my friend. I'm going to get back up and getting behind you guys. So Belgian Gulch says, let me just catch up with Can't Stop. Thanks for the comment. Can't Stop says, that's an awesome pad. The ladder is pretty cool. Thanks. This ladder is actually one root of a cedar tree. So this and that other piece are connected right up there. There's a big root ball you can't see. Maybe I'll show it to you. See that root ball? It's like one. it's all one piece. It's freaking cool. I love it. I built it as a temporary ladder, and there it stays. However many years later now, 3 years later. So thanks, Can't Stop. I'm really stoked on my little cabin. I built it myself. Cost me just a few $1,000, and man, it's changed my life. Got a little place to hang out. Love my one-room shack. So, catching back up, Belgian Gulch says, jumping from building J-tubes to batch boxes was a big step. Tall Shadow is a great inspiration. Yeah, it is a big step. And that's, one of the questions I get all the time, J or batch, what's the best one for me? And that's the biggest thing I say. The number one thing is I say, J's are exponentially easier to build. So, great to hear your agreement there. So, Tom Dibble, welcome. Thanks for being here. Tom says, first time builder here, building the water boiler late this fall. Very cool. Very cool. Never coiled copper before. Do you have any recommendations? My Peasla 426 just arrived and it's a beautiful door. That's awesome. I love to hear that, Tom. So I don't get a whole lot of customers who take advantage of those Peasla recommendations, and I always love it when people do because it's just going to mean that your stove is just gorgeous. So awesome. Really stoked that you got that. So copper coil winding. Great question. There's a safe way to do it and there's a risky way to do it. I usually do it the risky way and I have regretted it in the past. So the safe way to do it is to fill the tubing with sand, right? If you fill it with sand, then you'll be able to coil it carefully without kinking it, because it will not kink with sand in it. Now there's different types of copper tubing. The kind that they use for air conditioning line is really thin wall and it's pretty inexpensive. It's a good material to use, but it kinks really easily because it's thinner. So that one I definitely recommend you fill with sand if you're going to coil it. Once you fill it with sand, you can then put it around a form. I like to just use the little drum I'm using as the water tank, and I use that as the form, and I'll coil it around there, and it will be too big. It won't fit in there, but then you can tighten up your coils sort of gently. But if you're using a round form, to like a strong back, to form that copper around, you should be able to carefully form it around the roundness without kinking it at all. And the way to do that is you don't want to run it over here and pull from way out here. You want to just push right against your strong, right against your strong back, and just kind of creep it around this round corner. If you pull from out here, you'll kink it, right? But if you just fold it around the round thing, you can do a big coil without getting any kinks. So hopefully that helps. I can come back to that too if you have got more questions about that, but I'm going to catch up with chat here. So Can't Stop says thermal shock of stone isn't the best, and that's exactly right. Can't stop, and that's why it doesn't do good in the internals of these stoves. It just won't handle that thermal shock. Great. Very astute, my friend. Nice. So Robin L says, just a thought, if the back wall of the bench can be against a cement wall, can I just run the ends up against that wall and put brick support pillars for the top next to that back cement wall? Yeah, you can, Robin, and I think that what you're asking is basically, can you make that cement back wall the back wall of your bench? And you can, but I think I would caution you against that, because what you're doing is you are creating a giant thermal mass. I mean, it's just an enormous thermal battery that you're going to have with that concrete wall, which I assume forms a wall of your house. And so I think it would do more to pull heat out and send it outside than it would to store heat and keep it in. So if I were you, I would actually recommend, oddly enough, building your brick, bell with a bit of airspace away from that concrete wall, just to provide some insulation. Because I think that mass will just be a big cold sink, and it will just it will make your stove exponentially cooler than it otherwise would be. You'll have to burn far longer, and you won't get very much heat out into your space because it will be going out into the wall. So that's my take. I don't know. Every situation is different, and it might be different, but that would be my take. And then that leads right into this great question from Always Learning. And Finbear, you're welcome. I'm glad that helped. Always Learning says, do you ever place or consider thermal breaks that you don't need to heat, or where you don't want to waste heat? And that's exactly what I'm referring to, Robin, in your case. So the concrete wall sounds great. It's mass. It seems like it'd be a good thing, but it's kind of in the wrong place, right? It's on the exterior wall of your house. If it was an interior wall, maybe that'd be okay. But again, if it's too much, you're just going to be burning, trying to get heat into that wall. So do thermal breaks, are they a good... do we ever consider them? And yes, and this is a great example of a thermal break. If space is an issue, you could build right up to that wall, but I would insulate that wall. You could build using that wall as part of your build, but I would still insulate the inside of it so that it's not sucking heat away, and that your heat goes into the bricks that face into your space and radiate out into your space from that side. So Robin says dirt on the outside of the cement wall. So yeah, that's even worse, Robin. I would highly encourage you to to actually try and insulate that wall. Try and keep, think of that wall as a cold wall rather than a warm wall. Anytime you heat it up, you're just going to be shedding that heat to the outside. So if you can, down the road, maybe you might insulate that or something like that, and then your space inside will stay that much warmer. So hopefully that helps. So rocket stove cores. Hey, Luke. He's asking Tom. He says, I'm curious about what stove you used the Pisla in. Was it a batch box or a riserless? And I don't know if Tom answered you, Luke, but I will just tell you that the all of my riserless cores and the batch box stoves, so I don't include the doors with the cores. I don't include the door information with the cores because I figure people who are buying cores have a whole plan for their whole stove. But if you buy a stove plan from me, then I do have parts that fit those stoves. And yes, in my batch box plan, I recommend that Pisla 426, Luke. It's just about right it's as close as you can find production-wise to being the right size. It's got the right air format for a single air inlet with an interior door flange. So I can help you with some of that stuff, Luke. You haven't seen any of those details because those are part of my stove plans. Those aren't part of the core plans. So hit me up if you want some details on how those things go together. I'll be happy to walk you through it. And some of the old videos too, or the old stove chats have some of that too. So there we go. Let's see. So Rocket Stove Core says, how do you do primary air with a door like that? It looks great. And that's what we were just getting into. So we've talked about it on Stove Chat here before, so I won't go too far into it, Luke. But there's the door, and then behind the door you have a door flange. And in the door flange you have your secondary air and your primary air. And that big door covers both of them, and it just has a single air inlet. And that single air inlet covers both your primary and secondary. And now you're going to say, how does that work? And you'll have to go back to the old stove chats. We went deep into it with drawings and all that. And like I said, again, I'm happy to talk you through it so you can help your customers as well. But that's the gist of it. So, whoa, I'm getting way behind here. Tall Shadow says, super cool stairway with the root. It is cool. Thanks, Tall Shadow. I really like it. David Swanson says, my 1-inch CFB 8-inch riserless has no external cover. The outside of the CFB only gets too warm to touch, but not greater than 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's awesome input, David. Thank you very much for that. So, I believe, am I mistaken? Do you have 2 inches of thickness where you're saying that it doesn't get that hot? I believe you have 1-inch board, but you have double layers everywhere. I could be wrong, though, so you can correct me on that. So yeah, Robin, you're move away from the wall, great, or insulate, or whatever you need to do. Tom, you're welcome. I'm glad that was helpful on the copper. And Always Learning says, thank you, Old Stone Castles. Never-ending thermal mass took years to warm up. Nice to have serfs out cutting and stacking firewood from Sherwood Forest. Yeah, castle life was a little different, right? Like if we had, a whole village full of serfs, then I would just have a bonfire the size of a house inside my castle all the time. And I'm glad I'm not a serf, says Belgian Gulch, and me too. Belgian Gulch, me too, although, we're all sort of our own serfs these days. But that is okay. So what else? I've got some other stuff to go over, you guys. But let's take a pause and see if anyone's got any questions on their builds or anything like that. Anyone have any specific questions that they were hoping to get in edgewise here in between my running mouth? You guys let me know. I'm gonna check my emails here, make sure I didn't miss anything important on questions. No, looks like we got them all covered. Let's see. Okay, so don't see any questions coming in, so I'm just going to move right along. So I got a great question, and it's one that I've had from many of you, actually, and it is with regards to riser height. Oh, here's Robin with a question. There's a good one. So Robin asked me, is there insulation between the back of your bench and your outer wall? Yes and no, Robin. Do as I say, not as I do. No, so my wall here in that you're looking at right behind me there, is, this is just this. I don't even know how I can describe how my shack is built. It's so cobbled together. Like, I use logs and sticks, and I mean, it's just it's really a shack is what it is, and I have airspace between my bench and my outer wall. So that bench is actually about 4 inches off of the wall. So there's airspace back there, which is really good insulation. And then I do have insulation. It's within the wall, but the wall behind the bench, since you can't see it there, I didn't bother to sheathe it. So it's because I didn't want to put any wood hidden back there that I wouldn't be able to see. So it's just the framing. And then I just put my normal fiberglass insulation, and the exterior sheathing of the house is on the outside. But so yes, I'm insulated from the outside, from the exterior. And of course it's going to be different if it's, a concrete or a wooden wall. And in a lot of places, a lot of does dust accumulate in that space? Oh yes. I have a dusty little house, Robin. It's a shack. It's full of holes. I've got horrible insulation. You can see through to the outside. I mean, I'm living a pretty simple life. I don't know how you'd say it. Most people probably wouldn't accept it. I barely have running water, and it's just one room. But it works for me for now, and it is helping me move towards my goals. And I like it. It's a good, simple life. But yeah, it's dusty. It's really dusty, for sure. It blows all right through the house. So if you ever come visit, I'll make sure to dust. All right. So let's see. Pete asks, does your bench ever get too hot to sit on? And how big is the temp difference between the beginning and the end part? And Pete, that's a great question. It doesn't get too hot to sit down on, but it gets too hot to sit on comfortably for any amount of time. So in other words, it won't burn you. It won't even get close to burning you. You could put your hands on it. As hot as I've ever gotten it, you could hold your hands on it, pretty much as long as you wanted. But they'd be getting warm. And so that's, when I say too hot to sit on, I mean it's just too hot to be comfortable. So yeah, it does. In the middle of winter, when it's really cold outside, and like I just said, my house doesn't have much insulation, so when it's really cold outside, I've got that thing just blasting. I mean, just cranking 9, 10, 12 hours a day. And in those situations, that bench will get to the point where I don't want to sit on it. A couple minutes if I'm cold, take the chill off. But if you spend any amount of time on there, you get overheated. The difference between the beginning and the end isn't that great, to be honest with you. Right at the start, it is, because the beginning heats up fast. But after a couple hours, it actually is pretty darn even. I think part of that is having fairly thick tops so that it, it's slow to get out here and it gets over there. And, like I said, in the first hour or two, you can see a pretty big disparity. But as time goes on, and especially after I've been burning day after day after day, it kind of starts to even out. I don't know if I could give you a real temperature difference across them, but it's not great. There is a difference, for sure. The one end is cooler than the other always. I don't mean to say that they're even, but it's like either the whole bench is, the right temp or cool or hot. It's not usually one end or the other with the real extremes on either end. So they might vary, I'd say 20 to 40 degrees or something like that. But if one end of the bench is 80, if the cool side's 80, the hot side's maybe 100, something like that. So that's been my experience. They're all different, for sure. And, it's hard to say how yours will work, but I do think that the bell benches are pretty evenly heating. And then you can, of course, change the tuning, like by putting the exhaust, running it down the bench and getting the gases to flow faster, and you can adjust that pretty easily. As a matter of fact, my customer Josh, whose stove we looked at a few weeks ago, had some really good experiments and along those lines, and found he was really able to tweak how that bench heated. It's really tunable, is what I'm trying to say. So really, it's up to you. Do you want it to be different temperatures at both ends? We can do that. So there you go. Robin L says no dust in heaven. I love it. Augustus asks, would clay flue liners be a cheap way to put mass in an outdoor wooden bench? In these times, it would be nice to have company be comfortable outdoors through the fall. Yeah, Augustus, that would be a good way to do it. Clay flue liners are really, 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 they do make a really good, outdoor construction style, but they're kind of expensive. But it would make a great outdoor bench. Like if you were just to put them, like on their sides, 24 or not even 24, probably like 18-inch liners, 16-inch maybe, and make a bell out of them. I think it would be a great outdoor heated seating area. Might be a little spendy. I have done that in the past with those half barrels with just a thin layer of cob and then like a stone top. That's another way to do it. But yeah, I think flue liners would be a good way to go. Let's see. I'm going to catch back up here. So Can't Stop says you can use water as a thermal mass. Water is pretty much the ultimate thermal mass. You're getting the hang of it, Can't Stop. I'm stoked, man. This is awesome. So Augustus says the above question was meant to be paired with your J-tube core. Yeah, that'd be awesome with your J-tube core. It'd be really, really cool, Augustus. I think it would work great. And, you might play with experimenting, just running your J-tube core when I figured out that half barrel system, I started by just placing barrels horizontally on the ground and sitting on them and just doing like a real quick temporary bell to sit on. And it just gives you an idea of your layout and how nice it feels to sit on something warm. And, you might just kind of get started playing with some layouts like that and then start to look at your materials and how permanent you want to do it. But yeah, it'd be great with your J. So Belgian Gulch says, I used 4 inches of loose perlite between our studio mass and outside stone foundation. That's an awesome way to go. So talking about Robin's question about what do I do with the mass and then the stone wall there, really good idea if you can to put some insulation there to make a big difference. So Pete, my tops of my benches are about roughly 2 to 3. They're varied. They're old flagstones from a sidewalk. They were tearing up the sidewalk and getting rid of these flagstones, and so I was able to salvage a few of them. And so they're flagstone. They're about 2. One of them looks like it's about 2.5. Most of them are nominal, probably 2-inch. And there's one thick one there that I put at the hot end, so it's a little thicker on the hot end. And that thickness is good for inside. If it was outside, I've used like really thin, like 5/8, 3/4 inch like slate tops on outdoors to try and get faster heating, and it worked really well. So Tall Shadow is saying to Robin, perhaps there could be an air gap, but the top of the bench could cover most of the gap, but leave some holes for the warm air to escape. And that's what I have, you guys. There's an air gap between my bench and the wall, but the bench tops go back to the wall, so it looks like it's joined there. There's about an inch gap between that bench top and the wall. Those bench tops won't get hot enough to spread heat out, past an overhang. So you can bring that kind of closer to the wall, and it looks like there's almost no gap there. So that's a great way to go. So Luke says, can you discuss lining a batch box with fire brick splits? In the J, there's only 1 inch of CFB on the outside of the core liner. Could I replace some of the 1-inch liner of the CFB in the batch box firebox with bricks? How important is the V shape that I see in most batch box firebox floors? Those are great questions, Luke. Thanks for asking them. So yes, you absolutely could let those bricks into that first layer of core, so you only had 1 inch of CFB on the outside of the brick liner. Now, I've always just used those bricks as just like an inserted protective layer of the core that's already there. So I didn't want to remove any material. I just stuck them inside. It does reduce the firebox volume a little bit, but I always felt like they're going to go bad over time. I'm going to take them out, and I'm still going to have all this material in here, and I'm going to start up over again. I don't know that there's any real... there's no disadvantage to doing it that way other than it takes up room in the firebox, but certainly you'll get a neater finish if you let them into that first CFB layer like you're proposing to do, which would match how I do my J cores. It'd be fine. It'd be just fine. Like I said, I'll just reiterate again, I don't think it's necessary. It'll be fine. And then how important is the V shape in the bottom of the firebox batch box? Well, so it's a great question. I get it all the time, and sometimes I let it frustrate me a little bit because I want to say, well, whose design are you building? If you're building mine, then it isn't part of that design, and if you're building Peter's, then it's part of that design. So it's really just. I've found that I don't find any performance benefit in my highly insulated cores from the chamfered floor, and it's a giant pain in the butt to clean. I mean, it just sucks, in my opinion. Now, if I was building a high mass firebox out of fire bricks, maybe I'd find that it helped burn those coals that that don't burn very well because they're sitting against high mass fire bricks. So if you stack them together, they kind of can burn themselves off. CFB core doesn't need that. I feel like a CFB core lined with a thin layer fire brick doesn't need it either. I've never found there to be a major advantage. Keep in mind, again, this is something. I'm just going to harp on this one more time. That's a design element that is designed around Peter's burning style. Peter's burning style is one fire, one load of wood, then it goes out, and then you don't burn it again until the next day. And if you do, you're doing it wrong. If you put more wood on top of it, you're doing it wrong. It's going to be dirty. Totally goes against his design parameters. So, if you're building a stove that you want to burn one load of wood in a day and you want to extract the maximum efficiency out of that piece of wood because you're a drag racer and the 0.01% matters to you, then those little chamfered blocks at the bottom may make a difference. But if you're loading load on top of load, you have an insulated firebox, I actually think that it works the other way in my goals for my design. So experiment. Find out what you prefer. That's the best thing I can say to you with regards to an answer to that. Neither is bad. One isn't better than the other. It just depends on what your goals are, what materials you're using, all of that. But I will wrap it all up by saying if you are using my plans, this isn't to you, Luke. I actually got frustrated with someone the other day who kept asking me why my cores were built however they were built. And I was like, we're not here to redesign the core, So really, what I want to say is the my core designs don't have a chamfered firebox floor by design. It's not a mistake I made. It's intentional. So if you see it like that in the plans, that's my opinion of how it should be. You are welcome to have a different opinion, and you should experiment and find out what your opinion is. But when you look at the plans, it's done one way, you'll know that's how I prefer it. So I hope that wasn't rude. I just I keep getting these questions of like, well, Peter's like this and yours is like this, and should yours be more like Peter's? And I'm like, no, his should be more like mine. I mean, I don't really feel that way. I'm just saying, if you ask me if my design is not right because it doesn't match Peter's or whatever, I'm gonna say no. This is my design. So, and I am building his batch box, so I do understand. My batch box is a variation of his, but again, it's ceramic fiberboard, so there are some differences. We've talked about riser height and things like that. So, anyways, all good. It's a great question, and it's one of the most common questions I get is, should I put that V in the floor? And I'm just gonna say it every time. Find out for yourself what you think about it. That's probably my best answer. My opinion is it's a better stove without it, and that's why my plans are like that. So there you go. So let's see. Let me catch up here. So David Swanson says he has a 1/2-inch thick fire brick lining the CFB riser list, and it works well. Flat bottom with secondary air channel. Yeah, that's great. Let's see. Belgian Gulch says he took his angle bricks out too. And Tall Shadow says I took mine out too. So, I mean, thank you guys. That's all I'm trying to get to. That's where I'm trying to get to with all the people who are asking me questions, and with the doubts before building it. All of that is, I can tell you my opinion. You can extrapolate my opinion from all the times I say it and from my plans. But really what's important is going to be your opinion. And so you can use my opinion as a guide, and Peter's as well. But I think what's going to be really important is that you maintain in your mind that there's some room for experimenting and for my own choices here, and that goes with the insulation. Actually, the fire bricks in the firebox are a really good example of that. Fire bricks in the firebox, whether it's the chamfered bottom or whether it's just abrasion protection, you guys are all going to come up with, as time goes on, you're going to find what you prefer. And as time went on, I used to believe that I was always going to have fire bricks in there because I thought that CFB just wasn't going to be strong enough. As time went on, I found that I really prefer it without the fire bricks in there from a performance standpoint, enough that the durability factor to me is outweighed by the performance. So that's my opinion. You'll have to choose, find out for yourselves, but that's the biggest thing I can do is say, get in there, try it both ways, see what you think, especially things like chamfered floor or fire bricks in the firebox. Those things are easily, try it one way for one fire, try it the other way for another fire, go back and forth. They're just so easily experimented with. I just don't think there's any reason not to play with them, unless you just trust me and just think that it's better to have the bricks out, and then I just say take them out. So it is, and Robin says I like easy to light, easy to clean, and that's the biggest thing, is that little V is full of ash after just like 2 burns. It's a drag. It's not a big deal if you're burning one little load a day, right? So again, different strokes for different folks, right? Horses for courses. So let's see. David Swanson says 1/2 inch thick by 4.5 by 9 fire brick from eBay. Yeah, you can find those split fire bricks. I think Luke was asking you about those. Luke, you should be able to find fire brick splits on eBay, and they are usually about that thickness. You shouldn't have to cut them yourselves. Always Learning says, don't you now prefer no thermal mass in the burn chamber to keep from burning your hands on wood reloads? And yes, Always Learning, that's exactly it. In my experience in the batch box, that we'll just talk specifically about the batch box, you open the door, and if you have an insulated firebox, it's amazing. It's not trying to burn your face off or singe your hair. It's, you're not like throwing the wood in there because you can't get your hands near it because there's 1,000-degree bricks trying to singe your hands. That insulation, holds the heat in the box, but it also doesn't hold any heat in there when there isn't any heat. So if your fire's burning down to low, you open that door in an insulated firebox, it's a joy to load. It's not, you're not like, it's so much different. And it sounds like it'd be minor, but I promise you guys, you try fire bricks and try no fire bricks and do it a lot, and I think you'll have the same experience, because those fire bricks, they're just wicked hot inside a firebox, and then you load your wood and they flare the wood off. Those problems are not so bad when we have the thin fire bricks, but it's all a trade-off. So anyways, that's that. So Tall Shadow, Matt chat versus Peter chat. So I always do say that, and I mean, the beauty about all of it is knowing that Peter is a dear friend, and that when we're together we totally see eye to eye. And I think we could have this our versus conversations, and we'd both be saying, yes, I know exactly, I agree, like we are on the same page. I mean, sometimes I might say things and he would probably make some corrections here or there, but for the most part, I've told him, you're a drag racer, like you're going for the nth degree of efficiency, and so we've had this conversation between ourselves the times that we've hung out, and I hope that I'm not overstepping. I definitely have nothing but the utmost of respect and love for Peter. He's an amazing human. So I am just trying to point out differences in our goals and how we achieve them. So there you go. Who would win in a fist fight, says Augustus. And depends on your goals. Oh, you guys are killing me. That's awesome. So David Swanson says K23 or K26 insulating fire brick, easy to replace, 10 for $45. That's a great deal. And his dad is bigger than mine. Oh, that's funny. And Robin says, you're here because you appreciate my opinions. Thank you, Robin. I really appreciate that. And a still burning reload is hot, so I use an old welding glove to put the new wood in. Yeah, I mean, for sure. We all have our ways of dealing with it. And it's not the end of the world. It isn't. You know, a brick firebox is the norm, and they're fine. But I'm just saying, you just got to play with it and find out what you prefer. So Aya Knows Best on eBay is a good supplier, says David Swanson, for the fire bricks. Oh, you know what? Rocket Stove Cores, I'm sorry. You're right. You've been using 1 1/4 thick splits, and I think those are the ones I've got too. 1/2 inch would be a lot thinner. I was talking about the 1 1/4 ones. I apologize. I got my dimensions wrong. But yeah. Hey, Can't Stop Me. Good to see you, man. Thanks for showing up. We'll see you next time, huh? So we have been going for an hour, you guys, and that pretty much wrapped up. Yeah, that wrapped it all up. So I've got some photos of some builds, but let's save them. I would actually like to go pretty deep into what I've got here. And since we've been going for an hour today, let's wrap it up today. And we'll save this one for next week. I got some great stuff to share with you. And I think, so we're going to be getting into build season here. I've definitely got, like I said, photos of some builds to share with you. And we should hopefully start to have some more people coming online as we get going here. Oh, excuse me, it's my koi feeding time. So hopefully we'll start having some new builds. So please, you guys, send me photos of your builds. Send me your questions, and let's get together next week and do this deal again, huh? So, all right, you guys, I hope I covered all your questions. And, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys all being here. It means so much to me to have your support. So thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you, Luke, Leon, Two Trance, Can't Stop Me, Dennis, David, Robin, Alicia, Tall Shadow, and Belgian Gulch as always. Augustus, man, you are so nice. Thank you so much. Your kind donations mean a lot to me every week. I really appreciate it. Pete, great to see you, man. Thanks for being here. And yeah, we do have a good conversation, Robin. Really appreciate you being here. So, all right, you guys, I'm going to get going, and we'll be kicking things off next week with getting into burning season, that sounds like. So, all right, you guys, I'm going to hit the outgoing video. And I'll see you next week. Have a great week, you guys. See ya.